All right, so this video is going to be about something I think is very interesting. It's about the story of Adam and Eve. Now, if you are anything like me and grew up in the church or grew up in secular religion at one point in your life, then you have more than likely heard the story of Adam and Eve. The story of Adam and Eve was taught as some sort of lesson from God about obedience and punishment for non-obedience, but that's not actually what the story of Adam and Eve is about. So I'm going to share with you a discussion that Spirit and I had about the story of Adam and Eve and what the actual story of Adam and Eve is. Because remember, the Bible is a systematic tool created by the dark agenda, by the matrix, by the elites to control people in the matrix, in the system. It is a God spell. So its whole purpose is to control the masses. So let me go ahead and explain to you. That's why I always say there's truth in the Bible, but the Bible is not the truth. So let me go ahead and explain to you the truth of the story of Adam and Eve as told to me by Spirit. Okay? So the story of Adam and Eve is actually about the matrix and awakening. And you're probably wondering, how so? Well, I'm glad that you asked because I am itching to tell you how. Now, in the story of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden, there was the tree of life and there was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And both trees, Adam and Eve, basically the divine masculine and the divine feminine, were instructed not to eat of the tree of life or the tree of knowledge of good and evil. But why? Why would God not want Adam and Eve to know the truth about life? Why would God not want Adam and Eve to be immortal? Why would God not want Adam and Eve to know about good and evil and have knowledge of things? Why? Why? In the Bible, God is the matrix, the system, the dark agenda, okay? So, of course, in that context, God would not want Adam and Eve, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, to awaken, to know the truth, to know that there's good and evil, because as long as they don't know that information, they're easily controlled. Okay? So the tree of life equals living for you. Okay? Living and working in your soul purpose, stepping into your power and your divinity, putting yourself first, having self-love for yourself and authenticity to who you are. That is what the tree of life is. That's what the tree of life was about. Bible God didn't want Adam and Eve to know about their authenticity. Bible God didn't want Adam and Eve to know about their soul purpose. Bible God, the matrix, basically, I'm going to keep saying it that way, didn't want Adam and Eve to know about living for themselves and the God within themselves. Okay? Because Bible God, the system, the matrix, wants to be in control of the divine masculine and the divine feminine. The tree of knowledge of good and evil equals third eye opening, awakening, and awareness of the matrix existence. So, of course, Bible God, the matrix, the system, doesn't want the divine masculine, Adam, or the divine feminine, Eve, to have knowledge of the good and evil, of the matrix, of the control system. Because then, Bible God, the God spell, won't have control. Okay? So, Adam and Eve were literally, basically punished. Remember in the story, they were punished for eating the fruit anyway. So, Adam and Eve were punished by Bible God, by the system, by the matrix, for awakening and seeing the truth. That's why they were punished. That's why they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, for understanding and seeing the truth of the system, of the matrix, of the world. Okay? That was a no-no to Bible God, because again, with that knowledge, the divine masculine and the divine feminine cannot be controlled by the matrix. All right? So, this Bible story was literally a threat from the matrix. Again, the Bible is written by the matrix, by the system, by the dark agenda, by the elites. It's a threat. It was put in there as a threat, basically telling you that you either stay asleep and let whatever the fuck is done to you happen to you, or awaken and be punished for seeing the truth, for knowing the truth, for spreading the truth. Period. Okay? So, it's literally a threat from the matrix to either stay asleep or be punished for seeking the truth, enjoying your life, and being aware of the game. This story also created a rift between masculine and feminine. How so? Because the story is literally told in the Bible to place the blame on the divine feminine for being hard-headed and not listening to God, okay? But that's not actually correct. The story was created to put the rift between masculine and feminine so that we would not work together to seek knowledge of the truth. Okay? So that we would not work together to seek the knowledge of the truth of the system, of the matrix, of life. Okay? So, that story was created to demonize the feminine for having the ability to access the knowledge from the divine God. Basically, that story is punishing the feminine for having intuition. Okay? The feminine had intuition to know that something was not right about what was told to her about not touching the fruit. That's why when the serpent came to her, she did eat of the fruit. And let me explain to you the purpose of the serpent, because the serpent is not really the serpent either. The serpent in the story was never Lucifer. The serpent was divine God. Okay? Which is basically the Bible God's arch nemesis. The system's arch nemesis. The matrix arch nemesis. Okay? The God within, divine God, was showing Eve the way out of the matrix. So when the serpent came and told Eve, hey, God don't want you to eat that fruit, right? Why? You know what's going to happen when you eat that fruit? Well, you should eat the fruit and find out what happens. God's lying to you. That was not the serpent. That was not the devil. That was not Lucifer. It was divine God within Eve. Her intuition telling her, God is lying to you about this fucking fruit. The world is lying to you about this tree. Find out the truth. And that's why she ate of it anyway. She was listening to God within her, divine God, her intuition, telling her that what she was told by the Bible God was some bullshit. Okay? So when she ate of the fruit and went to share the fruit with Adam, basically when the divine feminine found out the truth through her intuition about the matrix and about the Bible God, she went to go tell her counterpart about what the fuck was going on and how they had been bamboozled. Basically, the divine feminine helping the divine masculine awaken. Okay? And then they were punished for awakening. And that's why the rift was placed in between the masculine and feminine, so they can't work together, because the masculine and the feminine actually do need each other in order to seek out knowledge, in order to dismantle the matrix, in order to see through the illusions, okay? So that's why we were taught that snakes are scary, evil, and demonic, mostly by Christianity. Go figure. That's why we were taught that snakes are evil, demonic, bad, sneaky, and scary. Because the Bible God, the matrix, wants us to stay away from the divine God, okay? To keep people from the divine God and the truth. So the snake actually represents transformation, healing, and rebirth, and it also represents wisdom, Kundalini energy, and the cycle of life, deep intuitive knowledge, and the secrets of the subconscious mind. So, in essence, the story of Adam and Eve was literally, like I said, about the system, about the matrix, and awakening. and how Bible God, the matrix, the system, does not want the divine feminine or the divine masculine to awaken to the truth, the knowledge of the tree of life, or the knowledge of the tree of good and evil, and they don't want you to access the tree of life. They don't want the divine feminine to tap into her intuition because in her intuition will show her that the matrix, that the Bible God is bullshit and that she's under the God spell, which will help her awaken Adam, which will have them come together and dismantle the matrix, dismantle orthodox organized religion, dismantle the dark agenda, dismantle the illusion. That's why the story of Adam and Eve is in the Bible. And that's why it's taught the way it is in the Bible. But I just explained to you what it really fucking is and what it really fucking means. So go forth with this knowledge and spread this knowledge to others that need this knowledge. I only tell you what Spirit has told me. So, like I've said many and many a times, if you have any issues with anything that I have told you or shared with you, you need to talk to my manager. You need to talk to the big guy, the CEO, the boss, because I am just the messenger. But guys, that's all I have for this message. I'm going to close this message here. I'll be back in maybe a day or two with some more for you all. But thank you again for being here. Thank you for being open-minded enough to engage with this content. I love you. Of course, that's why I do what I do. And I will see you in the next one. Have a beautiful day. Toodles.